Good evening and welcome to the Get Football Mercato show. Here every weekday to bring you the latest transfer news from across France, Germany and Italy. I'm your host Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Mike Riccardi from Get Italian Football News, Andrew Thompson from Get German Football News, and Jeremy Smith from Get French Football News. We start this evening with finally a confirmed deal that's been rumoured all summer long, and it's finally gone through, and it is that one, Mike, between AC Milan and Juventus, with Leonardo Bonucci returning quote-unquote home, and Mattia Caldara heading in the other way, with Higuain also joining the Milanese with that loan deal with an option to buy. Finally done and dusted. What are your feelings on it?
I mean, it seems like we talk about it every day, right? But I think, this is such a blockbuster deal. You have Bonucci and Caldara, a straight swap, valued at 35 million euros apiece, and then Higuain going on an 18 million euro loan with the option to buy for an additional 36 million euros over two installments. Now, I think, valued at 36 million euros, Higuain would have to have a fantastic season for Milan to follow through on that. But when you have such issues that Milan did last season with Cutrone and Silva and Kalinic really not being able to find goals, having a guy that season that has scored 15 goals in, I believe, the last 5 or 6 seasons in a row, this is a well-added bonus. And Caldara, the young guy, I mean, between him and Romagnoli, that's the future center back pairing with Daniele Rugani in the mix for the national team. So I think it's a great move for Milan. And on the other hand, Juve are getting back Leo Bonucci. It will help bolster their bid to win the Champions League. However, I'm wary of the response he'll receive, especially after scoring that goal in Torino last season and sort of celebrating and the fans getting on his back. So I don't know if he will be as welcomed as he once was.
That's the really interesting scenario in this one, because obviously AC Milan gets stronger and a nice young defender to add to the mix, an experienced striker in Serie A who's scored plenty of goals. There's no doubt that they're getting the benefit of this. But at the same time, Leonardo Bonucci returning home, the celebration they had last season, bits like that. Do you think that, as well as it not really being an open arm celebration, at least by the fans to join him, is he still got the quality to be the player that, along with Cristiano Ronaldo, be the one to push them over the edge in terms of Champions League?
Look, I don't think that Bonucci is going to be the one that pushes them over the edge, but it's certainly an upgrade. And, considering the Ronaldo move and other moves they may have in the mix, I certainly would put them right now as favorites to win Champions League. Before it would be Real Madrid, but with the players they've lost and may continue to lose, I would prefer Juve to be favorites. And I think Bonucci, while it may be somewhat of an unsettled reception, I think once play gets going, and I think if he can settle in and prove his worth, obviously the Juve fans will get behind him. So I wouldn't be worried too much on that front.
An exciting one to keep an eye on as the season goes on, with the sort of almost, you might even call Galacticos version of this Juventus side that we're seeing. On to breaking news that we have in France. So I'm going to bring you on this one, Jez, because we've just had a news story go up on Get French Football News about Yerry Mina, because it's a straight shootout between Manchester United and Lyon for the Colombian. It's an interesting one going in. I'll read the whole story. So they're both the two most likely destinations for the central defender, according to sources that we have contacted this evening. The situation should be sorted around the next 72 hours. As early as June, Lyon representatives had their first contact with Mina's entourage, receiving positive indications about his desire that if he was to leave Barcelona, that it would be to a side offering Champions League football. It was confirmed the player's decision not to seriously entertain persisting contact from Everton about 3 weeks ago, so they were out of the running. Mina stalled on making a move to Ligon, who were provisionally offered Barcelona 30 million euros in order to land the player, after being informed in early July of potential interest from Manchester United. It's understood that he prefers the move to the Red Devils, but two stumbling blocks are still in the way. United are hesitating making a formal offer for the player, as they're focusing on targets that appear higher up on their shortlist. For example, Toby Alderweireld is still interested in joining Manchester United. The other one as well, the second point of that one would be the Colombian wants a clear understanding of where he would be placed in any side he joins. Squad hierarchy, wanting to avoid another season of being on the periphery of the first team action, which isn't a guarantee under Jose Mourinho. Lyon, he would receive a considerably smaller salary, but would be strengthened at least by getting a starting berth. Lyon are suitably confident in this sort of realistic chance of signing him, and they've tempered negotiations with Benfica for secondary target Ruben Diaz. That being linked for about 45 million euros from the Portuguese side. But I want to get your thoughts on this one. Jez, Yerry Mina had a very good World Cup. Obviously, I really struggled to get a starting berth for Barcelona last season, which is why he's looking for the exit door, as long as Barca are also looking to free up a non-EU spot, which we might come on to a little bit later. But could he be an extra X factor they needed? That Lyon's centre-back pairing was the worry last season, even though they played Jeremy Morel sort of as a pseudo centre-back. Would he help strengthen that defensive line with this Champions League push?
Yeah, I think he definitely would. It's for the last sort of 2-3 years, centre back's been a little bit of a problem position, and there hasn't been that much consistency. They sort of Mamana looked a really good centre back, and then for some reason they sold him last summer, and then Diakabi looked a bit promising and sort of lost a lot of form over the last season, and I think it was quite a bonus that they got a decent amount of money for him. But as you said, Morel's actually hasn't done too bad a job there, but he isn't really. Firstly, he's not necessarily a centre back, and secondly, he's certainly not necessarily the future. And Marcelo as well, who had a solid season. There's been lots of rumours of him moving to West Ham, and again, also not necessarily one for the future. And Lyon sort of like their young players, as we may come on to a bit later on. So, if Mina wanted to go to Lyon, I think it would be a really good fit for them. They've got a very good history of sort of doing well with South American players, usually Brazilians, but there is sort of a past record of players from that area really succeeding there. So I think he'd be welcomed with open arms. He's proved over the World Cup what a solid player he is, how much he can bring at the other end of the pitch as well. And yeah, I think he's the type of player that Lyon have probably been looking for in their defence for a while now.
And that's the interesting thing about this report and this deal, that it seems to be that Manchester United are holding the cards for Lyon at the moment, because if they do go for Toby Alderweireld in the end, that would free up Lyon to take on Yerry Mina. But if they do turn their attentions to the Colombian, then Lyon may strengthen their desire at Ruben Diaz, who had a great season, didn't end up playing for Portugal in the World Cup, but it's a very promising centre-back as well. But that's not exactly the ideal scenario for any club, to be waiting on Jose Mourinho to be making a decision. But at least for Lyon's point of view, they have plenty of time, at least on their side, depending on which one they end up going for, and that regardless of which one they're going for, they're going to strengthen their back line, which, like we've said, is a problem issue, Jez.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've got the advantage over Man United that they've got 2-3 weeks longer to do their deals. So if it doesn't happen by the 9th for Man United, then, and Everton as well, I guess, then Lyon hopefully have sort of a free route in front of them to get him. But it's never ideal when you're waiting for other teams. But I think, unless you're one of the very top teams in Europe, you're always going to be waiting for everyone else or the higher clubs to do their deals, and then sort of feed off the scraps that they leave you. It's not ideal for Lyon as one of the top teams in France, but if they're shopping in the same market as very big clubs like Man United, then you can understand why the player might be holding out for the bigger club, even though Lyon are also going to offer Champions League football. So it's not ideal, but Olas is a past master at all these canny deals, and he's been saying a lot of similar things for Marcelo as he has been for Fekir all summer, which is sort of, he's not for sale, but he's 90% staying, but so he's making it clear to people that he'll listen to offers as long as everything else is in place for Lyon. So it looks like Marcelo will stay unless someone like Mina comes in.
And that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Really about these French clubs waiting for everyone else, but to be in the same market as clubs like that is always a positive sign, at least. On to things in Germany, and another defender looking like he may be someone else that's interesting Manchester United to add into that mix. Andrew, is Jerome Boateng. Again, rumours of him potentially leaving Bayern Munich. Supposedly they're softening their stance on the amount of money they're looking for, at least anyway, with Paris Saint-Germain also still interested. There was rumours of a potential swap deal with Anthony Martial, but that's been shot down by the Bayern Munich hierarchy, hasn't it?
It has, and I think it'll be predicated on, how to properly build a squad. As Karl-Heinz Rummenigge said, they already have at least 4 wingers at the club. They're not looking for a 5th. So, the swap deal involving Martial wouldn't make much sense. It wouldn't have anything to do with his level of ability. We all know the kind of potential he does have as a player, but it's not what Bayern need to really improve the squad moving into the season. And it's looking like he'll be going to PSG if he does leave. That's what the rumor is, the heavy rumor involving it's more like a destination. Personally, I'm wondering where they're going to take it, though. However, there's not been a lot of talk about how they're looking to replace him. And if he does go, they'll have 2 first-team center backs at the club remaining moving into the year. Potentially maybe some calls from the under-19s. As I said before, Mario Götze's younger brother is at the club, and he's a center back, so they might look to that, but that would just only leave them with 3, pretty light for a team who has perennial ambitions on winning the Bundesliga and also challenging in Europe. So I also do feel that Man United better look elsewhere. As I said before, I think Boateng is regressing. I think he saw a little bit of that this summer for Germany, and I think we look at last club season as well. There's a reason why Nicolas Süle played, the most matches for any center back at the club, including Mats Hummels. So he certainly featured more than Boateng did. And I think Bayern were at their best when it was Süle and Hummels instead of when Boateng was in the mix. So I think there's a reason why they're softening their stance, as you say. If the right bid does come along, I think he will leave. I just feel, even though I'm an Arsenal supporter, I'm looking out for United and saying I think they're better off looking elsewhere. I think Boateng's best years are certainly behind him, for sure, even though he's not even 30 years old yet.
And you make an interesting point as well, Andrew, when you mentioned that if Jerome Boateng leaves, they are a little bit more short in defence. And we'll talk about a player looks like he's on the leave as well in midfield, and they've had a couple of players there linked to moves away as well. They talk about, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge is saying about the balance of the squad up front and why they wouldn't bring in Martial, but at the same time, they seem to be weakening other areas to the point where they don't have the depth that they usually have. Is that a worry for Bayern Munich fans?
I think it could be. Obviously, it's an attractive destination, and there's plenty of center backs in the Bundesliga that they are interested in. There's been murmurings of Benjamin Pavard, from Stuttgart, but that's been ruled out as a potential move they're going to look at this summer. So I'm not quite sure where they're going to take it. The backup option you could maybe see them doing would be something similar to what happened to Pep, moving Javi Martinez back to center back. But another potential is if Niko Kovac does go with a back 3 that you saw at Eintracht Frankfurt, then he might be satisfied with rotating Süle and Hummels as the center of the back 3, and then utilizing someone like Joshua Kimmich or David Alaba as the left or right center backs in the back 3, and then Bayern obviously have a lot of wingers, so they could look for wide players elsewhere. I'm not quite sure which direction they're going to go. That's going to be down to the manager. But if they do stay with the preferred formation that we've seen over the years, then they're light. And as you say, it's a little bit puzzling why they would shun away a move for a winger, even though they're overloaded there, obviously, but then not try to really shore up the defense while letting their most senior center back go. So I don't necessarily, like I said, I don't know where the business is going. I'm sure they have something up their sleeve. They usually do, but time will have to tell. And the season's right around the corner, so the sooner they get it done, the better for them.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for Javi Martinez a little bit, thinking that if Boateng was to go and he maybe was then brought into centre back to be be more of covers there. It then weakens the midfield with another midfielder going, and you start thinking, well, maybe it's the arrogance of being ahead for the Bavarians, and maybe it might catch up on them this season. We shall wait and see. On to our focuses now, and starting with Serie A with you, Mike. And there's plenty of reports out this evening for us, and one big one at least anyway, for Juve fans, they're still looking at adding to their squad supposedly, and Cristiano Ronaldo's been whispering in some ears, very LeBron-esque as you may expect from the Portuguese maestro, but supposedly he's lobbying for one of his old Real Madrid teammates to be joining him at Juventus this season.
Yeah, so reports started coming out the day that Ronaldo joined Juventus that he was trying to lobby to get Marcelo in the Bianconeri, and now, you have French outlet L'Equipe really reporting tonight that that's sort of picking up, and Ronaldo continues to push for Juventus to go after Marcelo. Now, if that were to happen, and again, we're still in the very early stages here, but if that were to happen, that would be the guy that would push them over the edge to winning the Champions League. And then sort of going along with that report, their number one guy at left back right now, Alexandro, who was reportedly supposed to join Chelsea last season, that deal fell through. He was previously linked with PSG and Man U earlier, and then, rumor said it, he was keen to stay with Juventus after Ronaldo was signed. But it looks like if Marcelo is to come to Juve, then PSG could throw a 50 million euro bid for Alexandro.
Yeah, and it's almost like a merry-go-round swap deal, isn't it? They then use that money to bring in the Brazilian. But at the same time, while he's an excellent player and has been in the Champions League for the last couple of years, had a bit of an up-and-down World Cup, obviously because of injury at the same time, is this another sort of blockbuster move? Because Marcelo's not getting any younger either, and left-back positions are one of those moves where when they do hit the brick wall, they hit it hard at the same time. So is it still much of a risk for the Bianconeri to be going for someone like that instead of keeping someone who is a little bit younger in Alexandro?
I would say it's a risk because he is getting older, and like you said, he does have that risk of hitting a brick wall. But Alexandro just came off a very down year at Juventus. He was not in good form throughout the season. So if they're serious about making this push, look, everybody knows they're the heavy favorites to win their 8th straight Scudetto, but they want to win the Champions League, and Ronaldo is around the same age as Marcelo. So, you have this short window to do it, and I think, they would like to pull that trigger and really go after it.
It'll be interesting to keep an eye on that and see if he does join. On to news. I was actually speaking yesterday that there wasn't much news about Belotti potentially moving anywhere, but here we go, a day later, and there's all of a sudden he's back in the headlines, and it's Napoli who are reportedly interested in the Torino striker. Tell us a little bit more about a potential deal for him, Mike.
So Il Gallo has already agreed to a 5-year, 3.5 million euro a season deal with Napoli, and that's being reported by Criscitello. However, Napoli are keen to offer 50 million euro, and Torino are asking 65 million euro. And if this sounds familiar, it's because last season you had the clubs like AC Milan going after Andrea Belotti, and Torino last year were asking 100 million euro. Obviously, that price has gone down to 35 million euro, as has Belotti's performance. Last year, or 2 years ago, he scored 26 goals, and just this past season, he only scored 10. So obviously, dropping 16 goals in between seasons also hurt his transfer market and his worth. I think if he were to go to Napoli, he would be the head guy there ahead of Milik. In Napoli, obviously, after losing their coach and players like Jorginho and Pepe Reina are trying to sort of recuperate, because as it stands right now, I would actually pick Inter to give Juventus the biggest challenge for the Scudetto, not Napoli.
And they definitely need some reinforcements there. On to more news as well for potential incomings for Serie A, and a move that looks like it's getting closer and closer again for Fiorentina, who've done some nice business this summer, but an interesting one in Kevin Mirallas potentially joining La Viola. What do you think to that kind of move, Mike? Is that another one that pushes Fiorentina more towards the Europa League sort of positions that they want to be in?
I'm not so sure with Mirallas. I don't think, it's a guarantee that he's going to be super useful, but there's potential there. And for the price they're asking, it's a risk worth taking for sure. I mean, it looks like whether they do the loan with option to buy or just a straight out deal, given his age at 30 years old. For 2.7 million euro, it's not a big risk to take. And after a few years now of Fiorentina selling their top players, and obviously the dismay that comes with it from the fans, bringing in somebody like Morales should help the club, help them get along. But I don't know that he will be, their lead guy on the wing. Obviously, they have Federico Chiesa. They just signed Gerson on loan from Roma. The youngster has a ton of potential. So I see him as a squad guy, sort of rotating around, who has potential to score goals. But over the last 5 seasons, Morales' goal tally has gone down. Last year, he started out the season injured, and then he went on loan to Olympiacos, where he didn't do much. So I don't think it's this guarantee that he could help them get closer to the Europa League, but at the same time, 2.7 million euro isn't a big risk to take.
It would be interesting to see how we get on. On to things in France now, Jez. There's some really interesting deals happening potentially there. Again, it's outgoings whenever you seem to come on, Jez. And the first one is potentially for Rachid Ghazal. There's interest from a number of English clubs, including Leicester, Southampton, a couple more, interested in bringing the former Lyon man and now Monaco man into the fold. What do you think for a potential deal for him? He was sort of a strange move for him to head to Monaco last season, knowing that he was pretty much going to be a backup role. Obviously, it ended up being that. Didn't really impress an enormous amount, but a useful player for the Premier League sides?
Useful. At his best, he's more than useful. At his worst, he's a lot less. He's one of those players that sort of goes through phases of playing well. There were, a couple of different times at Lyon where for, maybe 6 weeks to a couple of months, he was more or less unplayable. And then he goes through months of complete averageness. And I know that's not a word, but I can't think of the right words. But, he's now at the age where he should be turning up a lot more consistently. And certainly Lyon fans didn't shed any tears when he left there, and he didn't do anything really at Monaco to sort of justify the gamble that they took on him. So, for teams like Leicester or Southampton, if he sort of bucks up his ideas, he definitely could be a clever signing. But I wouldn't necessarily want him to sort of come to my club, and I wouldn't be relying on him as a sort of my first choice right winger or whatever who's going to do a job for me week in, week out. He's shown too many times that he can't be trusted to do that, unfortunately. And you look at, if Leicester are thinking he's going to be a like-for-like replacement for Mahrez, and they're way off the mark, and if Southampton think he's going to be an improvement on Boufal, in terms of attitude, they're not that dissimilar. I think Ghazal's attitude is slightly better than Boufal's, but relatively similar character traits, I think.
Maybe an interesting one to keep an eye on, because I couldn't understand them potentially replacing Mahrez with Ghazal given his season. It doesn't feel like it's quite the level that they want to be. They are looking at other players, obviously. Leicester City, a few names have been thrown into the hat, but another one is Nicolas Pepe, who obviously interested in Newcastle last season, had a decent second half of the season for Lille as well. Is he someone that could improve what looks to be building at the Foxes, a side that's looking to challenge for Europa League football?
Yeah, I think he could. I mean, I sort of hold my hands up on this one. This time last year, when Lille signed him, I thought complete waste of money. I'd never been that impressed with him at Angers. I thought he was a sort of Theo Walcott-like, head down, run for the byline, but not really have any kind of idea what he was doing with the ball. And then he came in, Bielsa brought him in at Lille and was playing him more as a centre forward, which I thought was even more of a mistake. But as the season's developed, I think he's improved immensely, and wouldn't say was carrying Lille, but he came up with a hell of a lot of important goals for them. And in what was a really tough season for a lot of young players, both on and off the pitch, he's one of the ones that sort of really stood up, really kind of showed that he's got I guess, the mettle to deal with difficult situations, and rather than hide away, actually sort of seemed to kind of improve as the pressure mounted. And yeah, I've been really impressed with him. And he's still relatively young. I think he could. I think he's one who could thrive in the Premier League.
And it's good to see a bit of redemption for him. Really, it obviously cost a lot of money, and didn't hit the ground running at all at Lille, and didn't really, I think, justify it from Angers. I think I absolutely agree with you, Jez. But good to see him maybe on that redemption arc. An interesting one coming out of Lyon again, with obviously them looking at Jeremina. They've brought one in and one out over the last couple of days, or at least one rumoured to be going out. And we'll start with the youngster coming in. Rio Griffiths, been looked at by a number of clubs across Europe, the Englishman, the youngster. An interesting signing again for a club Ligue 1 that love playing young players. It's a chance for him to maybe shine over the next couple of years.
It is, but I'm not sure what Olas is thinking is. Not to sort of detract from Griffith's ability at all. I mean, I think he's got 34 goals in 34 games for in the youth league, so he's clearly got a hell of a lot of ability there. But it's not like Lyon are short of talented young strikers that are coming out of their development centre. They've got Guiri, who again had a really good youth tournament with France last week. Off the back of the one last summer, I think, where he scored 9 goals in 4 games or something ridiculous like that. They've got Maolida, who's possibly rumoured to be leaving. So, as well as the first team players they've got, and Terrier, who's been on fire in pre-season. So, it's not like they're struggling for strikers. So, it's sort of a bit of an eyebrow raiser that they've decided to bring in such a young, albeit talented player from abroad, when usually they don't need to do that, because they're the ones that are producing the young talent that everyone else in Europe is sort of looking at jealously.
And the knock-on effect of, like you say, many of those young players doing so well in the summer over the pre-seasons and different international tournaments, and bringing in young Griffiths as well, is that now other clubs are looking at some of their other players, like Maolida, who's been linked with a potential move to Newcastle United. It sounds a little bit funny, given that we know the Magpies have been struggling for cash flow this summer and attracting players in because of that. Does it seem like a little bit of a bridge too far kind of move for you, Jez?
I think it depends what Olas wants to sell for. Earlier in the summer, Willem Goebbels, who's the other one of the sort of 3 names that are really coming out of Lyon a lot, sort of Goebbels, Guiri, and Maolida. Goebbels wanted away, or his dad did, depending on what stories you read. But Lyon still managed to get about 20 odd million for him from Monaco. And Newcastle don't have the same kind of money as Monaco, but if that's the kind of money that Olas wanted to sell one of his young players, there's no reason why he's going to suddenly sell another one at a big discount. So, I completely understand Maolida wanting to leave. He's 19 now. It's about time he started getting a few more first team chances. But Olas isn't going to give him away. So I think Newcastle may struggle if they're not willing to splash the cash. They may struggle to bring him in.
And yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they did let him go. I couldn't imagine Maolida. He got a couple of first team appearances, didn't he? And I know he's eager to get started, as many players probably in that Lyon squad are willing to do. But maybe just bide your time a little bit, young one. We'll wait and see. On to things in Germany now, to finish off in the Bundesliga with yourself, Andrew. And the big news today, that's a shift again. It's Barca swooping in front of a Serie A team again, and we'll bring his mic on that in a moment. But Arturo Vidal looks to be set to heading to the Nou Camp, which kind of came out of nowhere, around 30 million euros. What do you think to the move?
I think it's good for both parties. We mentioned before that Bayern are a little light on centre backs, and they're overloaded on attacking players potentially, but they're also, for me, overloaded on central players. Renato Sanchez came back from his loan. James Rodriguez is still at the club. Then they brought in Leon Goretzka this summer, Corentin Tolisso, Thiago, Sebastian Rudy, Javier Martinez. They're all central players still at the club. So that's 7 or 8, honestly. And there's been rumors around Vidal maybe heading for the exit door for about the last year, honestly. So he's 31 now, and if he doesn't suit Niko Kovac's plans, if he's not the midfielder that he wants to necessarily build a team around moving forward, then I think the move would make sense, and it's hard to get a better move than Barca, honestly. And for me, I know that Barca has a couple of injuries in midfield as well, but I think he's the type of midfielder they might actually need at the moment. He's obviously he's a pit bull in midfield. He presses very well. He wins the ball back well, but he does have a bit of creativity about him, and he does have a goal in him as well. And I think any additional residual goal scoring that Barca can get, past their forward line, I think would help them in a great deal. And there's also been questions around how long Ivan Rakitic is going to remain at the club. I think Sergei Semper is injured currently, and Denis Suarez as well. And there was talk about Andre Gomez leaving the club. So if I guess it makes sense, honestly. And like I said, it's hard to get a better. You can't really go up from Bayern, really. And I guess Real Madrid and Barca is one of the two you can. He's done that, and like I said, he's 31 now, so this will be his last deal. Honestly, by the time he's done, he'll be 34 or 35, and he'll be looking to retire after that at some point, I assume.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be minding it too much. It's been an interesting trajectory for Vidal, hasn't it? From Juventus to Bayern Munich to Barcelona. It feels like he's taken a little bit of a nudge up the ladder every single time. Lucky for him. And it's strange that we thought that the non-EU spots for Barcelona were being spared for other players, and then the Chilean maybe speaking at one. But I want to get your view on this one, Mike, as well, because obviously he was pretty close to joining Inter, and he was seen as sort of plan B should the Modric deal not really happen. But now, out of anything, that seems to be probably their primary focus into now to move on from this deal and focus solely on somehow pulling off this deal for Luka Modric.
For sure. And I think, in terms of Inter going after Luka Modric wants out of Real Madrid, and why not go to Inter? They have three other Croatians between Perisic, Brozovic, and now Vrsaljko going there on loan. And I mean, obviously, for those of anybody who watched the World Cup saw how dangerous a midfield with Perisic and Modric can be. However, you have Real Madrid's president, Florentino Perez, saying that if any club wants Luka Modric, they're going to have to pay the 750 million euro release clause, which is just astronomical. Nobody's going to pay that. But you have Sky Sport Italia reporting that there is supposed to be a meeting next week between Modric and President Perez. So maybe there could be ground made there. But in my opinion, personally, and maybe I'm being too harsh on Inter because I'm a Milanista, but it looks like waiting for Vidal to be plan B is sort of biting them in the rear. They're going to miss out on him now. And it's still a pipe dream in my eyes for them to land Luka Modric. So in this limbo of trying to go after him, I think they're losing out on a really solid midfielder that could bolster them to challenging Juve for the Scudetto.
It's quite the bump up in price as well. I have to do some wrangling quite considerably, really, for him to think and fathom trying to pay that amount for any player, never mind someone as talented as Modric. But back to things in Germany, and a player we've spoken about a number of times this summer already, Andrew, is Ante Rebic. Supposedly there's been no offers as of yet, for example, for the Manchester United target, but rumours that there's other clubs now waiting in the wings to maybe make a move on the Croatian.
Yeah, and it's again, it's we have to mention teams maybe trying to lighten the load. There's an overhaul going on at Antwerp right now with Niko Kovac leaving and Adi Hutter coming in. They have a massive first team squad at the moment, so some people do have to be sacrificed in terms of center forward and attacking options. Eintracht Frankfurt are more or less spoiled for choice there. They just brought in Gonzalo Paciencia from Porto. Luka Jovic has another year left on his contract. Sebastian Aller came in last season. They just brought in Nikolai Müller from Hamburg, and they were relegated last season. So they're not short there. I don't watch enough La Liga to know if Rebic would suit Sevilla for what Pablo Machin wants to do. But I do rate him as a player, although I think for me, the question will be around him in terms of he's a very system-specific player. He was up and down for Eintracht Frankfurt, and I think people will look at his performance in the German Cup final and say, well, that's what he can do. And I don't think it was poor this summer in the World Cup either. I thought he was actually pretty solid in all respects. But last season in the Bundesliga, he was great at some points and he was poor in another, and I don't think it came off well from Fiorentina either. So I think for me, if Sevilla can bring him into the side, if he does move to Sevilla, and if he fits what they're trying to do from a tactical approach, then I think it would be a sensible move. With that said, that's the question that has to be answered in terms of his Eintracht future. The question there will be, will it be utilized the same way, or will he be just chucked out on the wing, or if it be used through the middle. There's a lot of questions about his future in terms of where he's going to be playing, how he's going to develop, because he's still only 24. So yeah.
This is the thing, isn't it, for Frankfurt? It's a great chance to cash in on someone that's obviously had a decent World Cup and shown everyone else what he can do. It's maybe their chance to use that money, save up a little bit, keep building this squad and become a stronger unit because of it. On to the final deal tonight, and it was finally completed. We talked about it last night a bit, but Max Meyer is now a Crystal Palace man. Not where we expected him to go by any means, Andrew, but is this maybe a chance for him to start completing his redemption arc, having given the sort of strange sort of end of the season that we had with the bullying accusations and expectations to go to Barcelona? It's quite different at Selhurst Park to the camp now, but a chance for him to maybe regrow his career.
I don't know if it's necessarily him regrowing his career. Meyer is, I'm trying to think of how to put this diplomatically. He's very self-assured as a footballer. Obviously, he came through at Schalke with a lot of promise, and through the German youth system as well. Under 19s, under 21s, he was excellent for them. But it never really came off once he made his breakthrough. He came through as a central attacking player. He didn't really thrive in that role. He was tried on out wide. He didn't thrive there. Domenico Tedesco comes in as new manager last season and moved him into a deeper central role, similar to what happened with Santi Cazorla at Arsenal. And he had a much improved season over the course of the year. He led the Bundesliga, actually quite a number of statistics that would show that he suits that role. But then you have the bullying accusations, and he didn't want to sign on, so he's been forced out of the club, or he has also left the club. So, for me, the issue with Meyer is that I think he personally wants to be the focal point of a team. And if you go to somewhere like Crystal Palace, and again, this is no disrespect, but he comes in and he's the player that people want to talk about most at that club. Apart from the likes of Wilfried Zaha, and he's a player that you can build around. The other clubs he was mooted to going to, he wouldn't be that key building block in those sides. Likes of Atletico Madrid, even those Barcelona's, Arsenal as well. There are bigger names than him in those teams. There's more important pieces to the puzzle. But at Crystal Palace, because he's still only 22, they can build around him in that midfield. And I think that's kind of what he wants. And there was rumors that his agent was asking for £170,000 a week, and I think that's astronomically way over the top. I don't think he's worth that much, but I think you can look at his potential as a player and say that if you can get back on track, then it's a steal for them, especially because it's on a free. But that'll be the question, because how Roy Hodgson's going to use him, that'll play a big role. Will Hodgson play a heavy pressing style that Tedesco played at Schalke, and that's what allowed Meyer to thrive in that deeper role? If he doesn't, he might falter. It's going to be used as more of an attacking player, and we've seen him struggle there. And obviously, the bigger question is the Premier League's a different animal than the Bundesliga, so there's a lot of questions around it. But apart from the wages, because it was on a free, Palace didn't make a massive investment. If it doesn't come off, they could always just move him on, and there will likely someone else that would take a chance on them. But in terms of him wanting to be the star man, I think this is the right move for him. But there's still a lot of questions for him to answer on footballing terms, in terms of rebuilding his career, like you say.
Low risk, high reward potential move, isn't it? Looking at it, and potentially a move that might just about convince Wilfried Zaha that it is a place to stay rather than move on from. That's all that we have for this evening. My thanks to Mike, Andrew and Jez for joining me this evening, as well as all of you at home, of course. Please do join us again tomorrow for more from the crazy world that is the transfer window. Thank you. Have a good night.